is calling on Americans to, quote, come together as a nation. And explosive allegations.
He wants to start a race war for the meeting.
Omarosa is calling her former boss a racist.
Lowlife. She's a lowlife.
The White House says she is a disgruntled former employee. But is there any merit to Omarosa's claims? We'll ask Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway and Elijah Cummings, the former chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Plus, just months before the midterms, a wake-up call for Republicans in Ohio.
We are in a tie ball game.
And potential 2020 candidates test the waters in Iowa.
When they go low, I say, we hit harder.
Could a publicity-driven lawyer for a porn star really be a serious presidential candidate? Michael Avenatti thinks he can. We'll talk to him here, live, fresh off his trip to Iowa. What's fact, what's fiction, and what matters this week?
From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Chief White House Correspondent Jonathan Karl.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this Sunday. The president is spending the day in Bedminster, New Jersey, the last full day of his working vacation. President Trump's time away from Washington has been relatively quiet, a marked change from this time last year when he was forced to address the deadly violence in Charlottesville. The president's response to that hate-fueled riot triggered massive blowback. It also shined a harsh spotlight on the president's own attitude toward race. And it prompted a conversation still playing out about who we are as a nation.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
That was President Trump's initial response to last year's deadly Charlottesville rally, failing to specifically condemn neo-Nazis and white supremacists, arguably the low point of his presidency. 3 days later, this attempt at damage control.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Making an already bad situation worse. But fast forward to this weekend, another rally, and so far, a very different response. The riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. The president tweeted yesterday, "We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans." But as the president preaches peace, a former staffer is calling him out.
President of the United States use not only the N-word, but other horrible things during the production of The Apprentice.
Omarosa Manigault Newman, the former Apprentice villain turned White House advisor, describing Trump as a, quote, racist, misogynist, and bigot in her soon-to-be published book obtained by the Washington Post. Here's what she told TMZ.
After the LeBron James situation, that the president really causing tension with African Americans right now?
He wants to start a race war for the meeting.
But Omarosa's own words last year threatened to undermine her credibility.
Do you think this president is racist?
Absolutely not. I would never sit nor work for someone who I believe to be a racist.
The White House says Omarosa's book is, quote, riddled with lies and false accusations. Meanwhile, when it comes to race, President Trump is saying, look at my record.
African Americans, so many others. I said, what do you have to lose? You have high crime rates, you have horrible education. So what happened is the African American unemployment rate has reached the lowest level in the history of our country.
And that is one Trump claim that is true. African American unemployment did hit a low in May. But despite those numbers, only 36% of Americans say they approve of the way Trump is handling race relations. And among African Americans, only 3% approve. And joining us now is Congressman Elijah Cummings. He's the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee and a former chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman Cummings, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
So you heard the president's message now, a year after Charlottesville. Let's put it up on the screen one more time. He says, we must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans. Has the president now gotten the message right on this?
No, he has not gone far enough. I think it's a low bar for the president of the United States to simply say he's against racism. He's got to do better than that. He's got to address the people who are espousing racist type comments and doing racist type acts. And the white supremacist, he seems like he can't say those words. But I think he can do better. And the other thing, Jonathan, is you got to look at. It's one thing to say things. It's another thing when we look at the direction that you're going and see that the very things that you say that you stand for, you undermine through your action. For example, I believe that he is about the business of suppressing the vote. I look at the way he has dealt with health care, taking away health care for so many Americans. And I look at the way he has treated and his administration has treated the young immigrant children and their parents. That is horrendous. And so, you know, when I hear the words ring hollow with me.
He seemed to reach out to you in the beginning of his presidency.
Yes,
and you met with him at the White House.
Yes, I did.
And you told him, this was March of last year, so before Charlottesville, you told him that some of his language on race is hurtful and insulting to African Americans. Have you talked to him since?
I talked to him once or twice, but that was close to a year ago now, right after I met with him. But in that meeting, I also said something else, Jonathan. I said, Mr. President, you cannot just be the president for a few people, for 36% of the people. You got to be the president for the entire nation, and you're not doing that.
Some of your colleagues, prominent Democrats in the House, have called him a racist, just flatly said the president's a racist. I don't think I've heard you say that. Do you think?
No, I'm not. I look at a person's actions, and you can label them however you want to label them. But I do not believe that President Trump has been a man of his word. I kept going back to his inauguration speech, and I asked the president right now to go back and read his inauguration speech, where he talked about unity and bringing people together and how our unity would allow us to be the very best in the world. And I think he has done, through his actions, almost everything he could to take that unity and throw it away.
So have you tried to reach out to him again? You know, you had a very strong message that you're giving to him right now. Yeah. But have you asked to see him again?
No. I once or twice, but I just don't. I've gotten to a point where I'm totally frustrated. Jonathan, when you are dealing with someone who calls lies the truth and truth lies, it's kind of hard. And after I met with him the first time, he did not accurately depict what happened in the meeting, and that gave me, you know, some pause.
So is it hopeless? I mean, what do you want him to do now? I mean, he's come out. Certainly the message is different than what he did a year ago.
Yeah,
it may not be far enough. He's not specifically calling out, still not specifically calling out the white supremacists. But what do you want him to do?
I want him to be honest, first of all, with the American people. I want him to bring integrity back to the White House. I want him to stop doing the things that he's doing and working in conjunction with Republicans in the Congress to suppress the vote. I want him to make sure that health care is provided to our citizens. And I want him to get his administration straight, because as far as I can see, it seems like they don't seem to know what they're doing, particularly when we look at what's happening with these immigrant children.
So I want to ask you about these allegations from Omarosa, but before I get you on that, let's hear again what she told us just after she left the White House in December.
Do you think this president is racist?
Absolutely not. I would never sit nor work for someone who I believe to be a racist.
So does Omarosa have any credibility on this?
I don't know. I don't know Omarosa, but I can only judge from what I've seen. You know, when people go around asking is somebody a racist, you know what happens? Once I say that, and if I were to say that, that would be the headline, and nobody would ever get the message. And what I'm saying to you, and the message that I want to get through, is that this president has consistently tried to distract us from the things that we've been fighting for, distract us from the great country that we are, distract us from being the moral authority of this world, and distract us from the erosion, I think, in many instances, his efforts to erode our democracy.
So I want to ask you on a different subject. Elizabeth Warren made some comments the other day that have gotten quite a bit of blowback. She was talking about law enforcement, and she said, this is the quote, "The hard truth about our criminal justice system, it's racist, I mean from front to back." She's calling the criminal justice system racist from front to back. Do you agree with that?
I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do know that right in Baltimore, we have had some real problems with policing. And it wasn't about black police and white police. It was just some bad police. And we ended up with a consent decree that we're working through now. We have to have smart policing. We have to have community policing. But certainly Senator Warren is entitled to her opinions. But that's where I stand.
The president has said, you heard him in the open to the show, over and over again, African-American unemployment is at its lowest level. And that's actually true. I mean,
that may very well be true, but we have to ask what kind of jobs are those African-Americans getting? And Jonathan, I can tell you, when I have my jobs fair every year, thousands of people come out trying to get a few jobs. And so, while the economy may be good, the question is does it have a direct effect on the quality of life?
So one last question. There was a story in Politico recently that said that the midterm elections could bring the first African-American Speaker of the House. Do you think that could happen? Do you think we've seen a lot of Democrats, a lot of candidates come out against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker? Is it time for an African-American Speaker of the House?
I think it's quite possible, but I'd bet everything I've got that Nancy Pelosi will be Speaker, period.
And you support her without question?
I support Nancy Pelosi without question. I think that she has been a phenomenal Speaker.
And no chance you yourself run for Speaker of the House?
No.
Okay, Elijah Cummings, thank you very much for joining us.
Already.
And now let's bring in the senior counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you right away about these allegations from Omarosa. You've heard them, obviously. She says that she felt a growing realization that Donald Trump was indeed a racist, a bigot, and a misogynist. You seem to be quite close to Omarosa when she was at the White House, and when she left, you called her a very valued member of our team for a very long time. So what do you make of what she's saying now?
The first time I ever heard Omarosa suggest those awful things about this president are in this book. And I think that Omarosa, unfortunately, has undercut her own credibility, whether it's in the NPR interview, confusing a very central fact in the book, that she has never heard those alleged tapes, and then she said the tapes really changed it for me. And this is somebody who gave a glowing appraisal of Donald Trump, the businessman, the star of The Apprentice, the candidate, and indeed the President of the United States. She told your own network, John, ABC News, the day after she was fired from the White House that she had resigned. Now she's saying she was fired, that Donald Trump is not a racist. She said she had never heard him use the N-word. Let me tell you something. 2 years ago today, Donald Trump asked me to be his campaign manager. I have worked alongside that man for over 2 straight years now without interruption. I have never a single time heard him use a racial slur about anyone. And I also never heard Omarosa complain that he had done that. And so the only thing that's changed is that she's now selling books. And look, I think Omarosa is a tremendous disappointment here, because she should be taking credit for all the great gains that this president has made with respect to that low unemployment number among African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and others. She should take credit for the fact that In his first month in office, he took decisive executive action on behalf of HBCUs, workforce development, prison reform now, the drug crisis, which I've tried to work on with Mr. Cummings and others on his side of the aisle. This president is saying with prison reform that if you've paid your debt to society, that you should be given a second chance. And there are over 6.6 million available jobs now in the Trump economy, and we want everybody of every background to have the skills, the training, the education, the opportunity, and the dignity of work if they so desire. So I feel like Omarosa could have taken some credit for that, said, look, I worked in the White House for a full year, and I got the ball rolling with the president, but that doesn't sell books, and that doesn't settle scores. So I understand whether it's 30 pieces of silver or a 7-figure book advance, people do change their loyalties and change their mind. But I would refer you to Omarosa's own comments, very glowing appraisal of this president's work and this president's work with respect to the African American community. Omarosa also criticized the Congressional Black Caucus while she was in the White House for refusing to meet with the president.
So just to be clear, she says that she heard the president use racially charged language even in the White House, including...
She never said that to us in the White House, and I certainly have never heard it, but why didn't she tell us at the time? Why not tell ABC News the day after she was fired that that is in fact what she witnessed? She was asked explicitly the important question by your colleague at ABC News, John, and she said, no, he's not a racist. She said, I would not be there, and I wouldn't be there. None of us would be there if that were true. You've got to, I totally agree with Congressman Cummings that you should look at what people do, and this president has made tremendous gains on behalf of the African American community and continues to. And I do have to correct the record. You said that the president has never denounced a white supremacist. I want to read you his quote from August 14th of last year because it's missing from the conversation. And I quote, racism is evil. All those who cause violence in its names are criminals and thugs, quote, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
Kellyanne, as you know, the president also said there were very fine people on both sides in that rally. That was a rally led by neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
And he denounced them, but you're not covering that.
No, but he said there were very fine people on both sides.
Why does that matter? Why does it matter that you're not taking the totality of his comments over the stretch of days, John?
Well, because I think it's still a question. Who were the very fine people on the side of the neo-Nazis?
Well, he's telling you who's not. He's saying he denounces, quote, the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and all those who cause violence in the name. And yesterday, in a very, very strong statement, he said that last year there was senseless death and division. He's calling for unity among all Americans, and he denounced all forms of bigotry and acts of violence and racism.
Still not specifically calling out the neo-Nazis or the white supremacists who are...
You just don't cover it. Do you even have, excuse me, does ABC even have the quote in your file that you're able to put it up right now for all your viewers? Probably not. But I just read it.
I mean, I think the fact that he said very fine people on both sides, and one of the sides was led by neo-Nazis and white supremacists,
whom he denounced.
I still don't understand.
He said they're criminals and thugs.
So who were the very fine people marching with the neo-Nazis?
White supremacists. He denounced all of them. You're just not covering it. But look,
okay,
I agree with Congressman Cummings. You should go. I answered the question, but you've got to show all the quotes to be fair. And John, I totally agree with Congressman Cummings. We should see what people's records are. So why don't you go send a reporter to Chicago, to Baltimore, to Philadelphia, where the mayor of Philadelphia said, we're no longer going to give information to ICE, and a child was sexually abused by an illegal alien who should not have been there. Why don't you go cover the violence? And we've got an increase in homelessness, in crime, in violence in these major inner cities that are governed by Democratic mayors who have not lifted folks out of poverty, have not created the jobs my boss has created for them.
Kellyanne, the Omarosa was the most prominent high-level African-American serving in the West Wing on President Trump's staff. Who now is that person? Who is the most prominent high-level advisor to the president on the West Wing staff right now?
African-American?
Yes.
I would say that, well, first of all, you're totally not covering the fact that our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and world-renowned
I'm asking you about the White House staff. I'm asking you about the people the president is with every day.
Well, the president works with Secretary Carson every day. He's trying to break the back of the scourge
who there is in the White House staff right now?
And we have Jaron, who's done a fabulous job and he's been very involved with Jared Kushner and President Trump on prison reform from the beginning. He's been there from the beginning. He worked with Omarosa and others of us.
Does he have an office in the West Wing, Kellyanne?
He has an office in the EOP, absolutely. The Executive Office of the President, yes.
But not in the West Wing. What does that say to have not a single senior advisor in the West Wing who's African American?
I didn't say that there wasn't, but hold on.
Who is?
There are plenty of people. If you're going by that and not by the actions of the president, which you probably should, then you should look at the fact that we have a number of different minorities. And the fact is that this president is doing well for all Americans. He promised on November 9th, on his election night, he wrote it into the speech. I was there when he changed the speech and wrote it in. He said, I will be the president for all Americans, even those who didn't support me. He said, and there were more than a few. He said in the wee hours of November 9th. And he's made good on that promise. Jonathan, look, you may not want to cover it as much as it should be covered, but the lowest, historically low unemployment rate.
I've said that already twice so far on the show.
I'm sorry.
So
don't
say we're not covering it.
Because it's a fact. It doesn't get covered enough, just like you gave 24 seconds of coverage to the vice president receiving the remains of American soldiers who fell decades ago in Korea. These things just don't seem as important.
Okay, so one other question, and I haven't asked you anything about Russia, is Omarosa said that she was offered $15,000 a month to work for the Trump campaign if she signed a document saying that she would not speak about her time in the White House. We've also heard the same number, $15,000, offered to two other staffers leaving the White House. Is the president in the habit of offering hush money to people leaving the White House?
That's an insult, and that is not what was offered. If she had worked on the campaign and she left the White House, according to her interview with ABC News, John, on great terms, that the president is, quote, not a racist, and that she's very proud of the work she did with him, and that she knows, and all the glowing appraisal she's had of Donald Trump's work over the years, most specifically in the White House and on the campaign, why not ask her to go back to the campaign? It is typical, and you know it, to sign an NDA, to sign an NDA in any place of work. I'd be shocked if you didn't have one at ABC. I'm told she signed them when she was on The Apprentice, certainly at the campaign. We've all signed them in the West Wing. And why not have somebody who has
signed them in the West Wing
there again?
You've signed a non-disclosure?
We have confidentiality agreements in the West Wing. Absolutely, we do. And why wouldn't we? And by the way, the fact
you're a public employee.
Well, hold on, but the confidentiality is implied. John, hold on. Thanks for bringing that up, because I would have been remiss in not mentioning something you didn't ask me, which is these reports that Omarosa surreptitiously taped conversations in the West Wing, indeed maybe even the Oval Office. For what purpose? You have a reasonable expectation of confidentiality and privacy in your conversations at your place of work. Why shouldn't we in the West Wing? Why shouldn't the President of the United States in the Oval Office, indeed, the few times that she was in there with him? I mean, this is, but look, many people who have left, I can name them, you know them, who have left the White House have been offered positions on the campaign, I believe at the Super PAC, because they've demonstrated their talent and they've demonstrated that they get the president, they continue to support him. That's something Omarosa told your colleagues at ABC News the very day after she was fired. She said she resigned. She changed that now in the book.
Kellyanne,
but why not offer? That's not hush money. Everybody sends an NDA. It sounds like she didn't want to sign it and didn't want to go back to the campaign because she had a book on her mind.
Kellyanne, I know you have to go. Before you do, I want to ask you about the midterm elections. The president tweeted, quote, as long as I campaign and or support Senate and House candidates within reason, they will win. He is predicting a giant red wave. Now, you are a pollster. You've been involved in campaigns for a long time. You don't think the Republicans are actually going to see a red wave, that they're actually going to pick up seats in the House, do you?
They certainly can, and here's why. First of all, this man makes history. He doesn't repeat history. He makes his own trend. He doesn't follow them. I would think that the media got all the polling wrong. I know you guys were doing national polling, which was irrelevant and inaccurate, but got all the polling wrong, didn't think he could win, probably didn't want him to win. This is somebody who's going to go out there and put up his own political currency. And we won 8 out of 9 special elections so far, John. That's a great track record. Here's the problem I see for the Democrats. is who's in charge of their party? Is it Tom Perez, who they don't respect? Is it the 28-year-old socialist? Is it the 70-something-year-old socialist? She gets her facts wrong routinely about basic policy issues. Is it Elizabeth Warren, who says that all law enforcement is racist from front to back and forward and backward? Is it Hillary Clinton, who still can't get over her loss in 2016? Who is the leader of the party? And what is their message exactly? They shut down the government at the beginning of this year. All of them voted against the historic tax cuts, which have led to 6 million Americans getting bonuses or raises or both, where our corporate tax rate has decreased so that these folks are hiring more people, lowest unemployment rate, GDP at 4%, energy development, renegotiating imbalance, non-reciprocal, unfair trade deals for this country. Hey. What is the message? That 400,000 manufacturing jobs are a bad idea? They have no message. And I went back and read speeches by President Obama at this point in 2010, his first midterm election. It was all gloom and doom. And for this president, it's all economic boom. It's a fundamentally different message. We understand there are 42 House retirements. That's tough. And we see that the party in power usually suffers grievous losses. But can you tell me it's going to be the 63 House seat losses that Obama suffered or the 54 Clinton suffered? Nobody's predicting that right now.
So Kellyanne, can you clarify something before you go? The president was again tweeting about Attorney General Sessions yesterday, saying our AG is scared, stiff, and missing in action. This comes after the chairman of his campaign manager, Brad Parscala, saying it is time to fire Sessions. Are Sessions' days numbered as Attorney General?
The president is frustrated that the Attorney General recused himself in early March of 2017 from anything having to do with the campaign.
Right.
And what the president really wants, if you look at all of his tweets and don't just cherry pick them, the gravamen of his tweets, John, are that he wants to make sure we're investigating all sides of the quote so-called Russian collusion. I've noticed that the media is almost silent about these new revelations that Christopher Steele and the number 4 at the FBI, Peter Orr, and his wife Nellie working for Fusion GPS. I don't want Americans to get so confused with this convoluted mess to miss the essential point here, was that the pro-Hillary people were so afraid that they needed to prop her up, that she was such a non-compelling, non-persuasive, pathetic candidate, that they had to dig up dirt on Donald Trump early on.
But to my questions, will Jeff Sessions be the Attorney General by the end of the year?
How in the world would I know the answer to that?
Well, what do you think? I mean, we have the campaign manager saying he should be fired. We have the president saying he's missing in action. I mean,
I'm not answering questions as to who will be in the White House at the end of the year. Okay. That's a crazy question. You just want to roll the tape sometime. I think the fundamental point here is that the Attorney General is doing great work on law enforcement, on pushing back on MS-13 gangs, on his SOS, which is the Synthetic Opioid Surge Task Force, working with the new DA acting director. But he has recused himself from this, and the president rightfully wants America to see that this Mueller investigation comes to a conclusion in a timely fashion. So far, no Russia collusion proven, and you know it. You know I was the campaign manager for the winning part of the campaign. I never talked to anybody in Russia. I talked to people in Macomb County, Michigan, and Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, not Moscow. You know it. There's no collusion. Paul Manafort's on trial, has nothing to do with the campaign, Russia collusion. The judge warned everybody not even to say those words.
Kellyanne Conway, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it. Coming up, the Powerhouse Roundtable on the president and race. And what did they think of Omarosa's allegations? Plus, you probably know him as Stormy Daniels' lawyer, but Michael Avenatti says he's seriously considering a run for president in 2020. He'll be here live, and we'll be right back. And we're back with the Powerhouse Roundtable. Democratic strategist Donna Brazile, Mark Short, who left the White House just 3 weeks ago, where he served as the president's director of legislative affairs. He's now a senior fellow at UVA's Miller Center of Public Affairs. Jonathan Swan, Axios national political reporter and political strategist, and ABC News contributor Anna Navarro. Thank you all for joining us. So, Donna, 1 year after Charlottesville, the president certainly has a different message. Let me ask you what I asked Elijah Cummings. Does he have the right message now?
No. I think the president's statement last year about, let me make sure I'm right, very fine people on both sides. And his statement this weekend, all types of racism, it echoes his same statement. You have to, this is a moral issue. Racism, there's no equivalent. The president has to condemn racism. He needs to condemn the KKK. He needs to condemn these groups. And they're not just marching in Washington. They're marching all over America. And so the president needs to come out with a firm statement. Look, he condemns LeBron James. He condemns our friend Don Lemon. He condemns Maxine Waters. Call their name and condemn these groups and the violence that they are out there perpetrating.
Mark, you were at the White House at the time of the Charlottesville tragedy, and you saw the president's response. What was your reaction in real time when you heard him come out and say, very fine people on both sides?
Jonathan, I think I've said that the White House didn't handle that as well as we could have from a PR perspective. But when Donna says that he should have called them out by name, this is what he said last year, August 14th. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its names are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups. So we say the president didn't call them out by name, but he did. We mixed the messages, which was unfortunate and wrong, but the president did call it out. And too often we don't actually remember that.
But we still have that very fine people on both sides. You saw me try to get an answer out of Kellyanne on it.
I just said, I agree with you. That was mixed messaging, and that was unfortunate. But to say that he never called them out is also wrong. The facts say that he did, and the president reiterated that yesterday.
Ann?
Look, for me, today, this weekend, is about Heather Heyer. Let's remember her name. Let us live like Heather. She lost her life a year ago. She was killed protesting white supremacists. She raised her voice against racism. Here's the problem with Donald Trump. Today is one day. But there's 365 days a year, and most of those days he is figuring out ways how to divide this country through racial lines, ethnic lines, immigration, whatever it may be. Whether it is going after John Lewis, whether it is going after LeBron James, Don Lemon, calling Maxine Waters low IQ. Just a few days ago, he was again tweeting against the NFL athletes taking a knee, African-American athletes. So many times he has gone after African-Americans, after people of color. We see him putting little children, immigrant children, behind chain-link fences. We see him attack chain migration, except when it is about his wife. I'm glad 47-year-old Melania can be reunited with her parents. I only wish the children who are at the border getting separated from theirs and put in a jail and being treated like animals would get the same benefits.
Well, let's turn to what Omarosa is saying, because she's picking up. But Jonathan, before we get to the substance of what she's saying, we've heard she recorded her conversations in the West Wing. She's got a tape of herself getting fired.
In the situation.
I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing,
I've honestly never heard of anything like it. Has it ever happened? Has someone ever recorded in the Situation Room before?
The presidents have recorded themselves.
Apparently played it on TV.
Because she was locked in the Situation Room, and she recorded as they held her in the Situation Room in a locked door.
When you enter the Situation Room, you have to give up all your phones. So that if she actually did that, that's quite an affront. But, I mean, the reality is, Jonathan, the media ridiculed and mocked Omarosa for the full year plus that she was in the White House. And now she writes a book, and all of a sudden she's like an oracle, and everybody's falling in love.
Well, I don't know if that's true, Mark. I don't know if anybody's calling an oracle. But let me ask you, Donna, you heard what she told us at ABC News right after she left.
Right.
The president's not a racist. I would never work for a racist. And now she's saying exactly the opposite. Does she have any credibility on this? Well, you've known her for a long time.
Of course I've known her for a long time, and I believe that we're going to hear a lot more from her because she has more than one tape. Okay, so let's get ready for the next reiteration of her tape. And Omarosa believes strongly that President Trump has displayed racist anxiety, racist rhetoric, and she's bothered by it.
Why didn't she say it when she was still working for him? Why did she deny it when she left?
Why did she go to work for someone who she perhaps believed that during the time on Apprentice? And then she said, and not just in the book, but she's also said that she has sought those tapes where he has used the vowel N-word. I don't know. I haven't read the book. All I know is Omarosa believes that she has a story to tell, and I'm the last person telling her to tell a story.
Omarosa has a buck to make. She is, look, I am no fan of Donald Trump. That is no secret. But that, and I would tell you, birds of a feather flock together. There is a reason why this is happening over and over again with Donald Trump, and it's because he has surrounded himself by people who are unfit, who don't have the character, and who have no loyalty to him, and so have no qualms about turning loyalty into royalties. That's what we are seeing. What? No, Omarosa has no credibility. She's Omarosa in my
why
book.
Did
but
they hire
neither
her?
Does Donald Trump or Sarah Sanders.
Because
he knew her.
The most interesting thing about it,
and she knew
it's not
him.
that complicated. And I've talked to people inside, men, senior men who worked with her. They're scared of her. They're all scared of her. I'm not going to talk about Mark. I don't know, Mark might not be. But let me tell you, I've heard from grown men who work with them say, if Omarosa says something, I was like, you do it. Like, they're literally scared of her.
There's a lot of focus, but there's less focus on Mary Elizabeth Taylor, who was an African-American staff on our team who did more in this White House to get Neil Gorsuch confirmed than anybody else. She led all of our confirmations. There's less focus on Jerron Smith, who I hired 10 years ago on Mike Pence's staff, who was leading the effort.
You still don't have a senior advisor to the president who's African-American, who has an office in the West Wing.
That's not true. Jerron Smith's office is actually in the East Wing. And he is in the White House. And we also we don't talk about Darius Meek, so I hired 10 years ago Mike Pence's staff also, who was head of policy for the Vice President of the United States. So there's a lot of focus in the media on Omarosa, but there's less focus actually on those who are actually doing really hard jobs and doing really good work for the president.
What does it say about the president? To be fair, she was at the very top level. She was at the maximum salary. I mean, you know, you can't say that he didn't give her the very top job.
And she was a big surrogate for President Trump.
That's fair, but there's also less attention. There's no attention on those names I just put out for you. In fact, probably no one has ever.
None of them are among the 55 top paid staffers on the White House staff. None of them.
They are doing phenomenal jobs. And in fact,
there is no African American.
Was just nominated for Senate confirmation for the role that she's been doing, so she could be head of legislature at the State
Whether
Department.
through The Apprentice or through the White House, Omarosa is a creation of Donald Trump, and he deserves this exactly.
All right, we've got to take a quick break. We will be back with more from the roundtable, but coming up next, we'll talk to one of the most high-profile and unconventional Democrats now considering a run for president. Michael Avenatti joins us in just a moment.
Whether it's me or somebody else, whoever it is, they better know how to fight. They better be prepared for a brutal campaign. They better be prepared for a cage match. And if they don't have the stomach for it, they should stay home.
I think if Trump still stays in, that Michael Avenatti could beat him.
Avenatti, I like the idea. I'll work for it. I'm a Republican and I'll work for it.
I think he has integrity, so that's a big plus to me.
There you have it, Michael Avenatti making his pitch to voters at the Iowa State Fair. He's been fighting President Trump as the attorney for porn star Stormy Daniels, but now says he is seriously considering running for president. Michael Avenatti joins us now. So let's start with the big question. Most of the world knows you as the lawyer for a porn star and somebody that goes on cable TV a lot. Why should you be taken seriously as a presidential candidate?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons I should be taken seriously. Number one, for over 18 years, I've been fighting on behalf of Davids versus Goliaths, some of the largest corporations in the world, con men, fraudsters. I've had great success, over $1 billion in verdicts and settlements. I've tried cases all across this country, so that's number one. Number two, I'm a student of the law. I'm very well versed in a lot of issues that are at the forefront of our society right now. Environmental issues, issues relating to the Supreme Court, issues relating to working people, and so I think that also qualifies me. And in addition, I have the ability to communicate with people without having to take a poll or hire some consultant to figure out how to tell people the truth.
So like Donald Trump before he got into this, you're somebody with no political experience, but Trump had a signature issue he'd been talking about for 30 years, trade. You can go back, consistent talking about trade. What is the Avenatti policy issue that you've been talking about over the years?
The truth.
The truth.
The truth. That is my policy. That is my policy issue, quote unquote, is the truth. The facts and evidence. I deal and have dealt in 18 years with facts and evidence. That's how you're successful as an attorney. I don't care how good a speaker you are, how good you are in front of a jury. If you don't have the facts and the evidence, if you don't have the ability to talk about the truth, you don't succeed. And what's happened, unfortunately, especially over the last 2 years, 3 years with this president, Donald Trump, is we've lost track track of holding him accountable as it relates to the truth and facts and evidence. And let me tell you this, I'm going to put Donald Trump on trial. We're going to have a trial one way or the other. The only question is, how many jurors are we going to have in that trial?
Okay, so let's try to pin down on where you stand on the policies, on the issues, where you fit in the Democratic Party. We'll do a lightning round. If you can please, let's do some short answers to some big issues.
Sure.
It's a long campaign, plenty of time to get into more specifics. But let's start with the last Democratic primary. Where did you stand? Were you with Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders?
Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Where did you stand on this issue of abolishing ICE?
I do not believe we should abolish ICE. That's similar to saying we're going to get rid of law enforcement, but we should curtail ICE.
Okay, you say out in Iowa that you're in favor of Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders issue. How do you pay for it?
Well, I mean, I think you start with not building the wall on our southern border. I think you also figure out what you're going to do relating to some of these tax breaks that were just given. But I think, look, this is a core issue. We have to provide a basic level of health care for all Americans, number one. And number two, if people then want to supplement that with additional plans, they should be permitted to do so.
Would you repeal all of the Trump tax cuts?
I haven't decided yet. I'm still analyzing the issue.
Okay, the biggest national security threat facing the United States right now?
I think it would be the situation in the Middle East, and well, I would say twofold. It's North Korea and Iran. And let me tell you this: if you're going to go to Singapore and have a summit, you don't go there for a photo op in front of some flags and a red carpet. You actually go there to get something done. If it was me, I'd still be there if we were still in the situation we are. We made no progress in connection with that. As it relates to Iran, you don't send out an all-caps tweet in the middle of the night in a situation that is that serious. The problem with this president is he has interjected too much uncertainty into the international front.
So would you meet face-to-face with Kim Jong-un?
Yes.
You would. Okay,
Absolutely.
TPP, the president, one of his first actions as president, ripped it up. Would you try to revive it?
I would try to revive it, but I would also try to revise it.
Really, a lot of Democrats thought that was that was a bad trade deal, bad for American workers. So you sound like you're a free trade Democrat?
I am a free trade, but it has to be fair trade, and I agree with the president that there's been a number of trade deals that have been put in place over the years that have been one-sided, but we can't just ignore all of our trade deals.
If Democrats take back the House, should they move to impeach President Trump?
It depends on the evidence and the facts. Again, I'm a big guy on evidence and facts, and it depends on the evidence and facts as presented by Bob Mueller.
But the facts you know now, should they be campaigning on impeaching him? It sounds like you're saying no.
I don't think that there's enough facts and evidence as we know it right now, but that doesn't mean that that could change or it may very well change next week.
So based on the facts now, you don't think there is enough evidence to impeach President Trump?
Not as we have right now, but I do believe, to be clear though, we need to be demanding why the president stands shoulder to shoulder with Vladimir Putin.
Should Nancy Pelosi be Speaker of the House?
You know, I think that's a very tough decision. I think the House leadership is ultimately in the House of Reps is going to make that decision. I don't know yet.
Okay, you say you will only run if Democrats seem unlikely to nominate somebody who can beat President Trump. I want to go through just a few quick names. Can Joe Biden beat Donald Trump?
Again, I'm not going to opine as to whether I think a particular candidate can beat Donald Trump or not, but here's what I'm going to say. Okay, over the years, the Democrats have had a lot of very talented individuals, but they have lacked fighters. They have lacked individuals willing to take the fight to Donald Trump and others, and that's a significant problem. And here's the other thing I'm going to say. A lot of the people that are considering running, they've been around for a very long time. If they had the ability to take down Donald Trump, if they had the ability to take down Donald Trump, they likely would have already done so. However, I do think that there are some people that are talking about running that might be able to do it.
Elizabeth Warren?
Again, I'm not going to comment as to certain names. I have my own opinions as to whether individuals can do it or not.
Bernie Sanders.
Again,
One more. Bernie Sanders.
Again, same. Look, I like Senator Sanders. I think he's been a phenomenal senator. I think he did a lot of good in the 2016 campaign.
Okay, there have been no shortage of controversies surrounding your business dealings. Let's look at some of the headlines we've seen over the last several months. The LA Times, law firm of Stormy Daniels' attorney hit with a $10 million judgment. Politico, feds target Avenatti over firm's unpaid taxes. CNN, Avenatti firm settles case with the IRS for $800,000. Don't the attack ads here essentially write themselves?
No, I don't think so. And look, I'll put up my background and my record of fighting on behalf of working people over the last 20 years against Donald Trump's any day of the week. I say, bring it.
Hillary Clinton released 8 years of her tax returns just after she started running. Will you do the same?
I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I'll look at the issue. But here's what I do know.
You don't know if you'll release your tax returns? This was a major issue with Trump.
No, I don't know if I'll release 8 years of my tax returns. But here's what I
But will you commit to releasing some?
Yes.
You will?
Yes.
How will you make that judgment of how many?
I don't know. I'm going to consult with people. We're going to see what the standard has been over the years. But where are Donald Trump's tax returns?
Okay, last question. You've criticized the president for not being smart enough to know what he doesn't know. So if you ran, tell us, what is your biggest weakness? What's the thing that you don't know?
Well, I think that clearly the idea that I have not held elected office is a negative, and I'll own that. But here's the difference between Donald Trump and me. Donald Trump promised the American people the best and the brightest. He's been able to surround himself with anything but the best and the brightest, and the reason is people don't want to work with him. Why don't people want to work with him? Because he doesn't listen to them. Because his ego does not allow him to take in that advice and act on it. I'm not built that way. Were I to be elected, I would surround myself with very qualified people, and I would actually listen to them.
Okay, Michael Avenatti, thank you for joining us in your first in-depth interview as a possible presidential candidate. Appreciate it. And we'll be right back with the roundtable.
What if we told you?
Okay, welcome back to our roundtable. So I want to get back to the midterms. Mark Short, the president's predicting a giant red wave. Kellyanne Conway said it could happen. Come on.
John, I think it'll be hard for Republicans this fall for lots of reasons. One is that you have more chairmen who are retiring. Republicans put in place term limits on their chairmen. Second, you also have the reality Americans like divided government. That is a fact that we have to realize. But I do think the president's an asset for most of those campaigns. The reason being is there's a gap between voters who are Trump voters and those who support Republicans in Congress. The president needs to help try to close that gap as best possible.
The Republicans lose the House.
I think it'll be hard for Republicans this November to maintain a majority in the House. I think we'll pick up seats in the Senate, but I think the president's an asset to those campaigns.
We have candidates, Democrats have candidates in all 435 districts. They're enthusiastic, they're passionate, they're outraising their Republicans, and I'm proud of the enthusiasm. Mark, I just want to say something. If the president condemned the KKK in 2017 following Heather Heyer's death, he should do it again in 2018 and beyond.
Red wave. Let me see. Only red wave I see coming is the red tide off the coast of Florida that's killing thousands and thousands and thousands of fish. Look, I think what we just saw last week with the special election tells us the weight that Donald Trump carries in a Republican primary. His endorsement makes a difference, whereas Bernie Sanders' endorsement, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez endorsement did not make a difference. There's very few endorsements that make a difference. His does. The big question yet to answer is, will his endorsement then become an albatross around their neck when it comes to general election time?
The president doesn't, I mean, the president may think what he thinks, but the White House, they don't think they're actually going to hold the House, do they?
They say, like, even when you get them privately, the most they'll concede is 50-50. I've never heard someone in the political shop or at the top level there say to me, we're going to lose the House. They won't utter those words.
Maybe Omarosa has recordings otherwise.
We'll see. All right, that is all the time we have. Thank you to our roundtable, and thank you for sharing part of your Sunday with us. Check out World News Tonight, and have a great day.